Hi.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
We're trying to get so that just Norwich can have as many meetings as the four towns that you used to cover.
Well done. Well done. I was wondering if you guys would ever do that.
Yeah, we don't want you to, drop the ball or anything, so
Exactly.
we want
Exactly.
to keep you going on it.
Keep me up.
Yeah, yeah. We're getting somewhere. Hey, Rob.
How's everybody doing?
I don't know, but your microphone has a cricket in it.
Oh my God, no.
There you go.
Oh, they're much better. Okay. Ready for the holiday season?
Oh, yeah. And it sounds like after it's warm here for another day or two, then it'll do a few inches of snow and stay cold. So we may be white.
We
So
had my nieces and nephews come up in 2019, I think it was,
yeah.
uh, which was a 3 foot dump of snow or something like that, as I recall. And they drove up. One of them drove up from North Carolina with almost bald summer tires,
Oh
Yeah.
no.
and they had forgotten their winter coats.
Did they know where they're going to? Yeah, we're having a little trouble with the temporary lack of snow tires. That is
Yeah,
really makes you feel helpless up here if you do not have the right gear in general, snow tires, winter coats, and all that. If you have
oh
it,
yeah.
if you have it, you're fine. But without it, you feel pretty exposed. So you're past your 1 month anniversary, aren't you, Steve?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think approaching 2 months now.
All right.
Yeah.
You got it
October
all.
21st. So December 21st. The solstice.
There you go.
Yeah. The shortest day of the year.
Well, you certainly seem to have, come up to speed, figured out what's going on with the regs and all sorts of issues. So it's really helpful to have somebody come up to speed that fast and be able to help out.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's
Have a
more to do.
yes, indeed.
But we're gaining some speed.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like a little traction.
Hmm.
You
Hi, Mark.
caught up to 2023 yet?
Yeah, right. That's the point. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Yeah, we're definitely playing catch up. I'm quite sure Ernie knows there's a meeting. He was asking me for details, which I sent him, so I
Okay.
think he should be jumping on.
It's just 6:30 now.
Yeah.
So I'm still not sure how much I have to contribute to, sort of the actions of this working group. Um, so I'll probably still stay in the background for this discussion. But I do want to emphasize that I remain a resource for background research topics. Other examples of how local municipalities might be creating regulatory language in
Hmm.
town plans.
Yep. The other thing, Stephen, I mentioned it before when we were talking. Um, when I start doing mapping exercises, it sounds like you're vastly more qualified on any mapping and GIS sorts of uh, activities. So it would be useful to coordinate that and have you help me or whoever's doing it,
Yeah, it's
do it in a way that's compatible with, so that it fits in the big picture and we're not going backwards and putting in a different format 6 months from now or something. Hi, Ernie.
How you doing?
Good.
Made it.
All right. Great. So I think we're all here. So why don't we call the meeting to order?
I would move the agenda, approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Great. So all in favor, I guess that's all of us.
Aye.
Any public comment for anything that's not on the agenda? Okay. Correspondence, any comments? I'd like to start now to talk to item 4, debrief of the planning commission discussion. Thought a bunch about the conversation and put some thoughts together in a PowerPoint later today that I'd like to share. I can post it, but just to kind of just to pull together some different ideas to frame the conversation. So I think I can share. Let me just see if I can. Let me just make sure this
I
is.
may have to
Okay.
make you a co-host. I'm not sure how that works.
Okay,
Um,
if we can figure this technical thing out.
yeah, I made you, if I make you a co-host, then you should be able to share.
Yeah, it looks like I can. Can you, let's see, can you see that?
Yep. Got
Okay.
it.
So this is just, what I thought was trying to come back and pull together some ideas is just sort of like, let's get to the base case. What's frame, kind of frame where we're going, the goals of the solar siting committee, and then options to explore. Setting some just sort of like, okay, can we all agree on some things? That solar siting reviews for CPG projects are based only on the town plan, not on zoning ordinances. So that's, we have to, if any project is going to need to go to the PUC, it has to be reviewed only on the town plan. And that is why we are thinking about the regulatory language here. So clear regulatory language to review proposals is essential in order to ensure clarity for citizens, for solar developers, for planning commission, the select board, and the PUC. And we don't have that now. Per the state.
Just to be clear, and I just jump in as we go
Yeah,
along.
please.
We're talking about projects, essentially ground mount projects above a certain size. I mean, above 15 kilowatts, say.
Yeah, we're not talking about putting solar on your roof. We're not
Yeah.
talking. We're not talking about that. That doesn't need the review, right? That's just that
Yeah.
doesn't need the review of
Just
the
to
planning,
be explicit about
of the
that.
planning commission, right?
Yeah, I got at least one comment of things about historical.
Of course
should
you
be
can
able
put
to
it-
put
you
thing
can put-
on roofs in the historical district.
There's plenty of them, and you can do
Rooftop.
that. So this is the work of this committee. Per
Yeah.
the state, solar generation facilities must be treated similar to other types and scales of development in terms of allowable land and use in particular areas. And that while there are quotas or targets for energy for every town, the state now recognizes, and they're backing away, that the towns do have inherent limitations. And so this kind of back in 2016, when they made these grand goals, like we have to look and say, what can actually we get done here? And it not be kind of feel kind of connected that is, we've got to meet this quota. If in fact it's just, if it's possible, fine. If it's not, the town.
I'm just to go back to that, Mary. I think it's perfectly valid. One of the messages I got out of the discussion in the planning commission was that people really appreciated having a balanced perspective of it. It's not that we're trying to stop solar, we're trying to help it go in the right place. And if you look at that regionally, to your fourth bullet, the state recognizes certain towns have inherent limitations. Other towns have more capacity conceivably than their quota. So it really goes both ways. Towns have unique characteristics that make the goals need to have flexibility. I guess
Yeah.
that's the point.
Rob, I see your hand. Could I get through the next few slides and then come back? Or is that,
Yes.
is that okay? I just would love to
Yes.
kind of get it through. I know it's going to be a lot of conversation, but just try to get through these thoughts because I think it'd be helpful. So our town plan must be changed. This is not like, oh, let's just do it. The state, it is, our current plan automatically or by default bestows preferred status on nearly all of the town of Norwich. These are no longer valid under the new 5100 rules. And so, the current town plan essentially gave a blank check to solar development in nearly all of Norwich, and yet very little development occurred. It says that, Mary, I saw your face. The current town plan says it's essentially, with very few exceptions and very little definition of that all of Norwich is a preferred site, except for ridgelines, except for shorelines, except for the town village and forested areas. So, but there's very little, even with that very open definition, there was very little development. Why? The topography of the town, the tall, the thin, the narrow ridges that we have, the steep valleys, and limited access to three-phase solar. And so, even with a town plan that was clearly written by people with a strong objective of enabling solar, we didn't get a whole lot other than what was built in people's homes and in limited things. So what are the options? So I'm thinking like, okay, are there two ways we want to look at this? We've been thinking, okay, let's clarify the language because we have to take away this idea that all of the town is a preferred zone. It's not permitted any longer. And focus and we've been saying, let's focus on like, what are the specific characteristics? Now, the other option is to just put that aside and say, let's try to go ahead as the state asked and say, what are this is their language, preferred, potential, and suitable, or with unsuitable, what they call no-go sites. And is that a different approach? And just say, let's clearly identify where, it's welcome to do this in our town. And this is what the state has said, they'll need a mapping exercise. We'll need to consult landowners rather than saying, oh, we're just gonna, we think this is a perfect site, and it's someone who's not particularly eager to see that happen. And, so this is what we've been working on. Let's remove the default preferred siting because we can't have that anymore. Let's try to figure out what are the specific characteristics that we want to try to identify, and let's come to some plan. Now that's created a lot of consternation in a sense of, oh, people are trying to stop this. Well, no, we're just trying to respond to the fact that we can't say the whole town is preferred site any longer. And how do we add regulatory language? And so that we don't have another time, we got 3.5 years fighting with a solar developer by people in town and lots of consternation. So how do we try to give some clarity? And the other thing, potentially, maybe there are other options, is to say, what are the preferred sites? This is from the town, the state: gravel sites, brownfield, parking lots, commercial, real estate, residential roofs. There may be others from the state document, other things we could put in or be considered. Put it in where there's electrical demand, support updates to municipal buildings. Well, we know that's complicated. Building codes, etc. But be specific and say, this is what our town wants us to do. I mean, I don't know whether anyone has gone to all the parking lots in the town and said, would you do this? We're trying to meet our goals. Would you do this? But that's something that if this committee wants to consider, we could consider. So anyways, that's just my thoughts after sitting through this and listening to people and getting folks' thoughts. So, Rob.
Well, I was looking for a reference to the comments, and I think it was in slide 2, maybe 3, about the recognition by the state that some towns have greater capacity and some towns have less.
Yeah.
Is that specified in similar language, or is that inferred from comments or
No,
lack
just
of
the
action?
state has been talking about that, Rob, that kind of smooth peanut butter. And we can get some references for you, but the idea that you can kind of take a calculation of you have so much land mass and therefore you should have so much solar, that kind of initial calculation has not worked out in actuality. So we can get that some references to what that is, but
Thank you. Yeah.
And it may be, I'd be curious, there's a group of questions at the regional commission level that we can ask. Some of those goals roll out of the regional commission's energy plan. And so that's on our list, I think, to talk to Two Rivers, including that.
so anyways, Ernie,
Yeah.
Jan, any response like from the solar committee about ways to go? Because just feeling like we're gonna spin our wheels if we just try to edit the document.
Agreed. And I think and I made some notes coming out of the meeting as well. And I think a couple things that I got out of it. One was that people clearly wanted to hear both sides, a balanced approach that said, we're trying to cite in the best places. We're not trying to stop solar. We're not trying to put it everywhere. It's both sides of the equation. And I think that's what I feel. And I think we need to get that message across. It's not just restrict, it is guide to the right places. And to your point, I agree that the fact that if you just look at the results over the last 5 or 10 years in terms of amount of non-residential rooftop solar, it's pretty small. And so what can we change to make that, get more of it? I also felt in the conversation that there were some pretty simple, and you did the same thing, Mary, where you were trying to get to what are the givens, what are the things that are background that everybody should have. And I think I had a list of those. There are commercial realities, which is three-phase power. You're within a half a mile of three-phase power, and just array size when it comes to economics. So commercial realities, what are they? And then a list of the state regs that dominate, the state policies. There's no point in talking about let's go clear priority 1 forest blocks when there's a 3-acre limit and forest block limits at the state level, wetlands, the group metering changes, forest blocks, 3-acre clearing. Those are state regs. But put them somewhere where everybody can see them and they're taken as givens. Then less of a given, but you need it clearly stated, are the Two Rivers regional statements. So what are their criteria and what are their justifications? Get them all in clear bulleted form. And then, there are a couple that I think are important. What are the impacts of large PV? We should make that so that we can look and say, there are scenic impacts, there are habitat impacts, there are forest cover, there are things during construction and then that aren't there after. But we should say what those are so that people can debate them, but make it clear. And then lastly, we should be very clear what we're doing to try and find places for solar. What is the mapping exercise? What are the conversations with landowners and what are the results that say, hey, it looks like we've got places we can do this. But there are just those 4 or 5 things that I said, we need like 1-pagers on each of these, or put it all down in bulleted form so that we have a common starting point. And it felt like we didn't have that with the PC.
Stephen and then Ernie?
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, so in my effort to do some background here, I've been reviewing town plans in the region, and I would recommend, and I'll send it to you guys, the excerpt from the town of Stratford's energy plan, where they are they sort of obtain the specificity that I think Jan, you're alluding to, and it's a really concise sort of breakdown of the town's response to its responsibilities under, 30 VSA 248A. And I think it's a valuable context for us to look at. So I would like to share that with the group as an exercise for you guys to review that. Maybe you've seen this before.
We've Stephen, thank you. We have, just FYI, gathered a number of town plans that are, considered well done. I think East Montpelier, Waitsfield, and others. And so happy to have that added to the site so everyone can have access to it. And thank you for looking at that.
You're welcome.
Ernie?
Yeah, I sort of focused on, it sounded like you were looking for a specific choice between surgical or
Yeah.
a more comprehensive. And Jan was talking about a lot of what I consider specifics, which I basically agree with all, at least most, if not all, of what he said. So there. But I think what we should do is take a vote. I think it requires a vote from the Planning Commission to basically, this is going to require an overhaul at least of the land use section and the energy section of the town plan. Might also impact other parts too. So I think that we're going to have to ask, because it's going to be significant changes to the town plan. And the town plans are supposed to last a maximum of 8 years. It's not that we can't change it, it can't be shorter. So just because we haven't reached 2028 doesn't mean we can't vote to say we're going to overhaul completely the town plan, and it'll be a new town plan when it's done. Okay, so I think that's one step we have to take, so that people understand we're going to do this thoroughly and we're going to do it seriously. It's not going to be surgical. The surgical approach, we had already tried that for a while, and it didn't seem to. It seemed to be a lot of trouble, really, and it seemed a lot of just language, playing with language and stuff like that, and that's really not what we need. We need, for instance, because the PUC will only look at the town plan will have to include clear sort of regulatory language.
Right. Yeah.
Well, recommending, for instance, that, and this is something I've always thought would be a good regulation, but now it's going to be in the town plan instead as a regulation, which is saying that all new construction must be designed so that the property the buildings have at least some portion, a large enough portion, as a matter of fact, to support, if they can afford it, a solar plate. I mean, let me back up, forget about this affording. You have to have, property, the buildings have to be oriented for a solar, being able to have a solar installation mounted on their roof, especially if they're in town or something like that, or in other places where there's not a lot of, there's subdivision or not a lot of land. And that's going to have to go into the town plan. So it's going to be a regulation, there'll be regulations built right into the town plan. And there'll be specific regulations too, like that. I mean, that's one I favor. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get in there, but do you get the gist of what I'm saying? And that's what I'm trying to get at, is we have to go after the whole town plan now, or at least those two sections, but that might as well be the whole town plan in a lot of ways.
It's a very different kind of frame of what we are gonna try to do then, and I think that that's a planning commission. I mean,
Yes.
if what we're seeing is that for the solar siting commission to do, solar siting subcommittee, whatever we are, to do its work, we need the town, and maybe because of the 50, you know, the new regulations, we need to rewrite the town plan. Or the planning commission needs to rewrite the town plan, then we're in a very different place. You know, and I think that, I do think, you know, Ernie, the one thing I'd say is that we are vulnerable right now because we've got a town plan that can't be used for regulation.
Right.
You
That's
know,
what I was
so
trying to
like
get
we
at.
want to look like Sharon, Vermont, you know, with a million, you know, so I mean, we just don't want to be, we need to be, you know, to the extent that people in town want to have say over land use. And clearly we have people here who, you know, the people who are attending this meeting have a very clear vision. I don't, you know, but there are other people, there's a lot of the town plan though that talks about other values in town that we want to make sure are reflected as well. So,
No, I agree. That's what I was trying to say, is it's gonna
Yeah.
take the planning commission to make this decision and take care of it. But what I was just, I mean, the the solar siting committee is not a working group now, is not gonna be able to take the whole thing. But for instance, the work you've done here is really good. You've gotten a lot of information, and you've synthesized a lot of direction and stuff like that. That's going to go a really long way to helping the planning commission come up with language in the pertinent parts of the town plan. You know, so this committee is not useless.
no, I
Because we have to take on the whole town plan has to be taken on. I mean, you know, it still has its function, which is you've demonstrated very well here tonight. And you know, so I'm not saying it's a bigger, it's just that I'm saying it's a bigger project, because I
Yeah.
think it has to be a more comprehensive. It's got to be more comprehensive, and we've got to build the regulations into the town plan, which is an odd thing because, you know, town plans never were designed originally. You know, you look at the language authorizing town plans and it says nothing about them being regulations. It says they're basically directional or aspirational or something like that, but they're not intended to be regulations. But now for some reason they are, and well, that's the way it is until it's changed. It's
Yeah.
above our pay grade.
For solar projects specifically.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's weird that it's just for that particular purpose, right? Is there any other way that the town plan is used as a regulatory document?
No, it is used as an interpretive document.
Right.
Oh, like
Right.
when I was on the DRB, we frequently, because our regulations were so full of loopholes and contradictions, we would frequently have to rely on the language of the town plan to sort of interpret what the regulations meant.
Right.
So, you know, hopefully we don't, you know, with the regulations under our care will be a lot clearer than they have been in the past. And our town plan will comply with do its job, which I guess is to provide some regulation now, not just be aspirational or interpretive.
Mhm. I do think though, if we're going to, if that's going to be the direction, if this committee's recommendation is going to come back and say, we cannot do what we've aspired to do, then the role of, then the other thing is, you know, if we are going to be moving in the direction of creating a town plan that is going to, let's say, you know, do as the state says and identify preferred. I don't really understand potential yet. The language in the document is not as clear. I mean, it's pretty clear what preferred is and it's pretty clear what no-go is, right? But what is potential? I think we got to figure out what that is.
Well,
how
I've
we-
seen it referred to in other town plans as possible with mitigation or something to that effect, where You have to review it very carefully. There are more sensitivities you have to take into place, but it is possible, you know.
So it's so that is in our current town plan. That is like how we would deal with the ridge line, right? You know, like it's not preferred, but there's, you know, if and or but, you might be able to get it done, even though it says it's you need a special exception. So maybe that's potential.
Yeah, I mean, the danger, and just to be clear on the nomenclature, and I know that the state, that 5100 uses the word preferred in some of its language, but if you then connect all the dots and read some other things, and actually Chris Katuki's letter
Yeah.
refers to the same sort of thing. The word preferred now in the new regs refers to a project later in the stages, after you can't be preferred until the planning commission and the regional commission and the select board have given you the letter, which doesn't happen until after the application process is well underway. So really that first block of land, people are using the term prime, or so the word preferred has now very isolated specific meaning.
It's
But
after
anyway,
it's after the, sorry.
yeah, it's after the application 45-day. You're in that 45-day review period of a pretty defined application.
Right. No more like pathetic little schematic scribbles that get approved. Yeah.
Right. So, but anyway, that's nomenclature. But I guess back to Ernie's point about surgical versus broader, I'm not sure I'm there yet, or I'm not sure I see what the need. I mean, we've gone through an exercise where if you look at the language that's adjusted in the town plan, it's not that big a set of changes. And then if you get pushback on that says it's too defined, too definite, too restrictive. What is it that we would be doing with a larger holistic overhaul of the plan that is different than what we just did for the last 6 months?
I think that it's, I'm being a little bit legalistic, but I think it's that any change, any significant change, and this is still a significant change to the town plan, means it's a new town plan. So, and the other thing is that, you know, even though the town plan is broken into chunks, a lot of those chunks interrelate with each other. So if you make a change to one, you may have to make other changes to other ones, to make the whole thing stay working. And I can't think anything off the top of my head. I can't think of anything specifically that would do that related to solar siting and so on. But, you know, I haven't put the whole thing together yet either. I mean, I haven't seen, I don't know how other towns have done it yet or that as well. So, I mean, at some point I have to go look at some of the other town plans that have done this successfully. I mean, somebody just brought up Stratford, so that would be a good one for me to look at.
I've seen Stratford, Sharon, and so forth. They're similar. I think it came out of a Two Rivers model because there's a lot of similarities across several of the towns in Two Rivers.
Yeah. Stephen?
Thank you. Yeah, I just to, Ernie's point and the point in general, surgical versus a larger sort of review, we are now halfway through the lifespan of our town plan. In this next year, the Planning Commission should begin to undertake planning for its 2028 revision, to give sort of a 2-year run up to complete that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's convenient.
Well, and I've seen
what
different.
time?
Well, I've seen arguments too that people will do, they do an overhaul, and then they'll do rolling changes. So the 8-year total redo cycle seems to have some leeway in it, and it's done differently by different towns.
Mhm.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not saying that we postpone this due to the fact that in, 2.5, 2 4/5 years, we're going to have to revisit everything. I'm just bringing that to the,
Mm.
the group attention.
Yeah, I mean, in doing a town plan, you can keep the good parts of the old one. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to, I mean, I'm just for example, this might be all that needs to be changed for 2028, by 2028, I should say. I'm not saying that's true either, but if there's anything, if other parts of the other one are good, they should stay.
Right.
So,
And, and in looking only at the solar siting and the energy part of it, we're not looking at all the other comments about the town plan, all the other, comments about what do people value in this town. And I think that in some ways it's just been, looking only through a very thin laser. And I do think that the conversation therefore could be broader and potentially it'd be interesting to more people in the community. Yeah, Jan.
I'm trying to simplify the sort of the plan or the intent, because I don't think we need to kind of throw out what we've been trying to do over the last 9 months and start again, because it seems like if I just took the bare bones of what we've been talking about, we have to, I agree, we need to remove the default preferred siting. That's just, it's
Yeah.
messy and it goes against the new state law. And it hasn't worked to the practical sense
Yeah.
of it. But so if you remove that and then you balance it with a strong effort to identify prime areas and specific sites. So you just that pair of changes right there is very important, and I think would go a long way in making more solar happen. Then you have the redo of our scenic inventory, which I purposefully left at the planning commission level because I think that's the right place. We, this group, should assume there is a scenic inventory in place. There is one now. You can refer to it. And then the planning commission needs to get that redone.
Yeah.
Because there's no question that a critical part, not the only impact of large solar, but certainly a really big one, is aesthetics and scenic. And that's part of what, you're going to use to pick your sites. So get the scenic inventory redone and reference it. And then it comes down to these restrictive / stronger than aspirational statements about ridgelines and historic and riparian and slopes and so forth. And those are a few bullets that you need discussion about. How strong do you make it? What numbers do you make it? How do you put flexibility in? But it's only those few things. Remove default, identify prime, redo the scenic inventory, and craft the right statements about where it's essentially where you're restricting it.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not that huge an undertaking if you add it into all the stuff we've already done.
So Jan, given that, I mean, your comment, and I agree. I mean, in some of, it's interesting too, because as we've been so focused on solar, for steep slopes, for example, I mean, right now I'm looking at the not on anything to do with solar, but it says steep slopes are poorly suited to development. The landform of Norwich is dominated by narrow valleys and steep slopes. as severe weather events increase in frequency and intensity, reviewing land use regulations as they pertain to development on steep slopes will be needed. Okay, so we've only talked about steep slopes and like where can we put and how steep can it be for solar. But I think it's a bigger issue. It's and it's there. We said the same thing on riparian areas, and so yeah. So anyways, I'm babbling a little bit, but it is a bit because there are a lot of parts of the plan that we're not touching, or that we're not even discussing that are absolutely relevant to the discussions that we're having, because we're only looking at like this. But if you were to take your comment, like, Ernie's saying, let's get the town rolling on a new plan. In your lens, the next step would be to do the scenic, kind of redo the scenic inventory and continue.
Well, I think that is an important resource. And again, to your point, not just for solar.
Not just for solar.
If we want to talk about high density housing or what's going to go in various districts, we need the resource of a scenic inventory so that we can, because that is literally an inventory of what the town cares about on the dimension of view sheds and however you do it. So I think that just goes along, that is an important piece of the town plan documents that is very long in the tooth because it goes back to 2001. But it should be taken as a resource that all these various other things are going to use. And then to your point, I think it's true that because you can't treat solar as special in terms of development, then as soon as you start talking about steep slopes or where you can put it,
right,
you have to use the word development instead of the word solar project and figure out how to craft that.
Right. Ernie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that really what I'm saying is tear down everything. That's I think it may have sounded like it, but it's not what I meant at all. But what I'm saying is that, for instance, new concepts have to be built in too. You were talking about, for instance, using brownfields and rooftops, and those are critical. I mean, this is an industrial, solar is regardless of how you look at it, it's an industrial endeavor, okay? And it's best to be, if we want to have both a half decent natural environment that is sustainable and nourishes not just humans, but the animals, the wildlife, the forestry, the whatever, everything. You can't have the everywhere a solar panel, a solar field. Now there are things that are built into the solar industry, for want of a better term, that makes it amenable to a lot of adaptation, so that it doesn't really contradict any of those aspirations of sustainability or environmental integrity or anything. One of the big ones is putting them on parking lots, putting them on lands that have been, building rooftops. And right now I have heard, and I've been taking a little bit of a poll, periodically whenever I can talk to anybody about it. People don't like the idea of putting a solar panel on top of their roof. Why not? I mean, if you've been, and granted, I'm a sci-fi nut, I'm a techie, I've designed things, I've been involved in this field professionally.
Yep.
Rooftops was always where it was going to go. It wasn't going to go taking over big fields and stuff like that. That was never no one ever envisioned that until relatively recently. It may be valid, but even so, there are, if we're going to put it in natural places, put it in the middle, along the medians of highways and on the sides. High roads are blights as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they're ugly. They're a perfect place for solar panels. But people's rooftops are a perfect place. They're even talking about making them with the tiles and all that. So we're going to be, trying to encouraging people to think about solar more than just these large scale industrial plants. We should be encouraging people to think of, their own solar installation. And a lot of them, if you don't want to look at a set of solar panels, put it on your roof. They look like tiles. They're black. They're no different than tar paper when it comes to aesthetics. Maybe they're a little bit nicer than tar paper as far as aesthetics is concerned, or asphalt shingles, or whatever you want to call them. What I'm trying to say is there's a lot more flexibility. Solar is not really this rigid as some of it's starting to sound like here. To me, there's lots of opportunities and lots of ways of keeping it from harming things that we value. And it's one of the few industrial things that I think it starts off on the right foot as trying to be sort of saving the environment rather than hurting the environment. And so I think that we should be able to encourage people to sort of get their hands on it themselves as well. So.
Well, and there's a pretty high percentage of people who do have solar in this town.
Yes, but
I mean, so I mean,
most of them are ground mounts. Again, it's people just have this allergy for some reason. They've somehow been talked into believing suddenly that you can't put them on a roof. And
Now, if you look at the numbers, Norwich has a higher rooftop solar residential scale rooftop solar build out than most towns in
well,
Vermont.
all I'm getting at is we can encourage it. We can say, have your house, there's also passive solar. We haven't even started talking about passive, all kinds of other things. I mean, people will have their houses backed up, backed into the woods or something like that. We could discourage, planning, discourage projects that are encourage projects that don't do things that make it difficult to use, for instance, solar panels in a environmentally and human friendly and aesthetically friendly way.
Yeah, I think I had this conversation with Eric Wrench, who's the chair of the Energy Committee, and he worked before he moved here. He worked doing solar installations, both rooftop and larger, and he had a good familiarity of where Norwich was in terms of rooftop build out, and we really have implemented the easy stuff. I mean, we've got 12 kilowatts between the barn and on the roof here, and it's virtually invisible and works perfectly well. And I think if you go around town and look, you don't even see them. They're invisible, and then you go, oh yeah, there's another one. There's another one. But the point is that it goes back to the goals question. If you say Norwich needs to, and pick a number, if it's some number of megawatts that is needed for generation over and above what we already have, it's on the order of, call it 10 megawatts. The whole thing was 16 of our previous goal, and we've got at least 3 or 4 of existing. We won't get 10 megawatts more of rooftop solar based on what we have for housing and so forth. And I've done the parking lot of the Monshire and the parking lot of King Arthur Flower and Huntley Meadow and so forth. And you're going to get 500 or 600 megawatts out of those if you covered those with canopies. So, I mean, that's part of the commercial reality or this goals reality. If you are holding to a statement that Norwich needs to cite some number of megawatts of PV generation, you're going to be talking about finding places to put 3 to 5 megawatt plants. So you got to be specific. There aren't that many sites. There are some. And that's the point.
Well, that's why.
But sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's why if you, I mean, I'm staying away from requiring that new housing include some provision for solar, but that might be the right way to do it, really, maybe it should be required. All housing should have some sort of solar orientation or ability to have panels mounted.
You know,
And shouldn't be located in places that you can't do that either. I mean, a roof, if you can put a house there, usually you could have a rooftop installation. I mean, there's very few places you're not going to have absolutely, you're going to have absolutely no solar orientation available to you. It just doesn't exist.
the affordable housing is gonna go worse and worse, Ernie, I mean, I mean, maybe in the long run, if you think you're building your house for 20 years, but I mean, the other thing is like, I mean, look at Vermont is the second cloudiest state in the country, right? When you start talking about putting huge, large scale solar up, yeah, bring it, build it in Vermont. And, for the however few days of fabulous solar sun we get. And so, I mean, that may be why Ernie people are like, I'm not sure this is the best use of my cash. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would certainly advocate for the benefits of solar even in this climate, and I know what it does for us.
Yeah.
But I think to Ernie's point, again, if we talk about something, building codes say,
Yeah.
in the context of solar, then you really have to immediately pivot and say, what's that topic, like building codes, look like in the broader sense? So do we have building codes that say people must have well-insulated houses so they
Right.
don't need as much
Right.
energy? Do we say they need to have electric cars? Do we say that, that they
No
can,
more 8,000 square foot homes. Like, let's everybody live in a tiny house. Like,
sizes
if
of
we
homes?
want to
Right.
do it, if we're gonna say we're gonna be environmentally solar's not the only way, right?
And yeah,
So.
but you quickly get to,
Oh,
you run into,
you're not changing my mind a whole lot here.
well, I'm just saying that you have to be realistic about what we're gonna get through. If you say what we're gonna do is building codes, required thou shalt building codes,
Well, like I said, I was trying to
you're gonna
refrain
run
from
into,
doing that, but the point is that, you can order things or you can make things, you can sort of design your regulations to sort of gently gently, but certainly encourage certain behavior.
Right.
yeah, it's
Right.
guidance.
Right, but even that, I mean, look, there's been plenty of financial incentives to gently encourage a lot of the things you're talking about, Ernie. Right? I mean, in the country. So, but we all know, I mean, drive across the river and look at the building going on right across the river, the energy that's going to be taken by the ginormous new Dartmouth building and, the new parking lot and all the new dormitories. I mean, we can try to solve energy as best we can in Norwich, Vermont, but
All I can
just,
say,
yeah,
all I can say is it's a typical multi-billion-dollar corporation. Just because it educates and it's supposedly nonprofit doesn't mean it is.
right. But
And
again,
let's stay focused here on
we
what
digress. We
have.
digress. But partly it
have
is like,
a-
let's think about the regulatory world, which we can, look at, you're talking about trying to influence with regulation.
Well, that's why I would really like, and I'm certainly willing to give this a try. What I stated before was, can we put 5 or 6 bullets of the state regs that it's
Yep.
not worth arguing about? They are givens. We can build off your presentation, Mary, and just add, we're trying to set up the givens, the assumptions,
Yeah.
so that everybody's starting from the same place. We don't have to adjudicate, whether or not somebody's going to clear 5 acres to put something in. It's not ours to say no, but it's not going to happen. And so let's just get that listed. And then I think let's put the effort into this identifying prime areas and sites. Because I think it would go a long way to relieving the sort of the pressure and the debate here. If if we want to have a conversation about how to where we think we're going to want to restrict or, really push back and need justification and mitigation and so forth. If we want to be able to do that in places that matter, the other side of the coin has to be shown, which is identify prime locations, make it real, and show that we've got ways to get a few megawatts of generation in this town. It gives us credibility, and it is accurate to what the charter of this group says it wants to do, which is encourage solar in the places appropriate to the town's topography and character and dot, dot, dot.
So besides the standards set in a scenic inventory, what else would we use? And there's the,
Well, the
and
easiest-
the statutes too, by the way.
I mean, in terms of finding the prime areas or the kind of what are the givens for limitations?
Well, first to find to determine which ones are the places where they
Right,
should.
yeah. Well, the exercise that I did, and we can decide, how much we want to publicize this. I do think that the talking to landowners piece is important. But if you simply do half a mile to three-phase power, and then look for a large enough, up 10 acres or 5 acres or more, you narrow it down pretty darn quick. It knocks out 3/4 of the town right off the bat. And then you can focus and say, oh, look, there's this old gravel pit. There's this piece between the highway and something else. So that exercise, went pretty well and didn't yield the null set of options. So how should we go forward with that? I know that if you just publish a map with some squares on it, it blows up in your face and does not make for constructive conversation. If we can say, oh, we're going to go talk to these landowners, we're going to somehow publish the criteria and then, let people kind of do it in their own heads. But I think we need to go forward with that.
If you said,
Sorry, or just to your point, I would recommend you look at the town of Stratford. They've done an excellent job. It's a concise list of the areas that they determined to be preferred and or otherwise. It's and I will send it to the group, but I think it's a good reference framework
so they don't,
to answer that question.
so they don't use, they don't necessarily lay out the criteria. They just say these spots are fit within our criteria. Is that how it works?
They are explicit in restricting solar use to named locations and sort of occurrences of natural features without sort of getting into the details, like A&R layers, riparian. It's a good read in an effort to sort of frame the preferred sites question. That's all I can say to that.
All right, I definitely would want to see it. Because something that Jan just mentioned a couple minutes ago is the three-phase closeness to three-phase. And of course, I was thinking, of course, it is just a matter of telephone poles and some wire. I mean, you could add a short distance and expand, if just because it stops in one place doesn't mean you can't add a few hundred yards more.
Well, I mean, I did that research just based on commercial viability of distance to three-phase power, and that's where I got the half mile with a bit of help. About a half a mile is where, if you're trying to build a 3 megawatt or a 2 megawatt system and you have to extend three-phase power more than half a mile, it starts to really impact the viability. So it's not zero, but it's not running it, from here to the end of Beaver Meadow, a new three
I
miles.
know, I was thinking along Route 5, I think was one of the places, and there's some sites that I can, off the top of my head, say,
Yeah,
great places, but they may be just outside of the reach of where three-phase is if you use absolute, just where the three-phase is. But I mean, if you
yeah,
think
yeah.
in terms of
Yeah,
adding,
I did it as basically a loop, within half a mile of.
I mean, it's, Jan, I think the idea of talking, and I don't know if the Energy Committee, has done any talking to anybody about any specific sightings like this. So probably checking with that leadership would make sense, because if they have, it'd be good to know if conversations happened already and what the response was. I mean, if it was, no way, get off my front porch versus, and then I think we have to have a conversation about that too. Because I think we want to be respectful. I mean, at least I would hope we would want to be respectful in our town plan to say, these are the areas where we have discussed with people and that would be open to it. Now, it'd be,
Well,
Okay.
with a verbal description or just the three-phase map, it jogs the imagination pretty quickly and pretty specifically to say, here's where it is, here's where it isn't. Even if you put the half-mile extension on, that would get the conversation started. And then, yeah, I would like to, and I can, I talked to chair of the Energy Committee already. I can go back to him with that specific query because, the Monshire or King Arthur Flower, has anybody gone to them and said, have you looked into covering your parking lot with a canopy? It's a simple conversation, perfectly willing to have it, but I don't want to go there if somebody did it 2 years ago and, nothing's changed. So I can certainly reach out to Eric and ask those questions specifically.
Yeah.
Have they knocked on doors of
or
potential?
even done some research to know whether there's some funding that could be supportive of that, because I'm sure that for many of those places, they would be, cost would be a factor, certainly the Monshire,
Right.
imagine. And in the town as well, if you were to say Huntley Meadow.
Yeah, Huntley's, unless you put them all over the sports fields, the parking lot at Huntley Meadow isn't worth it.
Well, that's a great way to get support for solar there, John. We'll put that out there and, we'll say that it's come from, all the folks who are so psyched about it.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I think,
that'd be good.
but there are some, and certainly if you look at Route 5 north,
Right.
from sort of Leonard Cook's old place going north,
Yep.
there are several sites that just, pop up as, one of them is behind the Norwich Town Well, where there is already a relatively large site, but that doesn't fill that gravel pit. So, why wouldn't you fill the rest of the gravel pit with panels, so there are some simple questions like that where you can identify landowners and have a conversation, or people already have.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like the next steps are, I will continue to kind of fill this document out with additional regulations, state regulations that are guiding the thinking about it. Jan, you will have a conversation with the energy person, the chair of the Energy Committee.
Yeah.
I'm going to start looking at kind of the town plan more holistically to think about where some of the other vectors connecting certain characteristics are, whether it be slope, whether it be soils, et cetera. Because to the extent that they are related to the town regs.
Yeah, like the word development, as soon as that is activated, which it is for slopes or things like that, then what other pieces of the plan overlap with development? And there are obviously a lot of them. What do people think? I mean, I can put a little a little map in the minutes with just the three-phase power, plus half a mile on
That would
it.
be good. That'd be helpful.
It's a given. It is an actual infrastructure statement. And I can quote a reference or two that says by half a mile is a good number. But that's the only map that I think we would want to put out. But it does narrow it down.
Yep,
Okay.
helpful to have. Okay,
I'll send you my summary blurbs, Mary, well, let flip it around. What do we want in the minutes versus what you're compiling? Because we could put your presentation or the next round of your presentation in the minutes, or we could look at it at the next meeting and build on it.
I think to be transparent, we should put it in the notes right now with with it being a working document that was shared, and there'll be additional commentary, etc. But I wouldn't want to not put it in. I think it's important that we put it in.
Okay, so we'll do that as an append. We'll have a couple appendices.
Did we record this meeting?
Yes.
We did. Okay, so it's in there anyways, but still don't want to make it hard for people.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
So does that cover next steps along with debrief? Sounds like it.
I think so.
All right, so it looks like from what Pam said, we have 2 sets of minutes. She seems to think we didn't approve the July 16th minutes. If she
July
put them-
16th. Who
Yeah.
was there? Let's go back and look.
So I'm sure she put them in, which means she doesn't have an officially approved version.
Okay.
And
Let
I'm
me get
looking
that
at
up.
it. No, all 3 of us were there, so nobody's allowed to abstain.
All right.
It
Can
was
we move for the approval of the 2 sets of minutes?
So moved.
yeah. Second.
All in favor? I think we got it.
Yeah, we got it. All right.
Phew. All right.
Good. Motion to adjourn.
Amen. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.